I want to come back to sort of the establishing habits. I sort of think of that as like, what are the ones that we consciously choose? We want to establish the correct automatic behaviors that are putting us on the greatest path towards success. But before we do that, I sort of wanted to dive into a little bit about your gym habit and how you made it every day. I sort of think of that as rules versus decisions, right? And so you don't have to make a decision every day. You know, the rule is, and you design these rules either to put you on the path to success because you know that you don't want to have to decide about this in the moment. Like, I'll have a lot of friends experiment with dieting and it never seems to work. And I went up to one of my friends and I was like, your rule is you never eat dessert. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, this way you're not deciding. You don't have to decide. That decision is pre-made. So you've pre-made these decisions that put you on the path to success because you've identified in advance, like, this is the path and the trajectory I want to be on. What are the rules and automatic behaviors that I can create for myself? And then how do I do that so that I don't actually have to decide? And you can also do that identity based, right? Like, I'm the type of person that goes to the gym every day. I'm the type of person that writes every day. I am a writer, and then therefore I do it, and that's my rule. I write every day. And now you're not thinking about it, you're establishing that habit.
I love it. The social part of what you're saying is great too, because once you tell people your rule, then when your friend is at dinner with somebody, say, "Wait, didn't you tell me you're a person who doesn't eat dessert?" Like, so they also have become kind of an enforcer because there's no, yeah, I like the rule versus decision has another element which I really like, which is there's a person in my life I just do not trust. Like, even though I spend a lot of time with this person, I just do not trust them. Like, it's embarrassing to say, but I don't trust their motives. I don't trust them to follow through on anything. And that person is me. Like, you should not trust yourself. And so decisions, it's like handing over bubble wrap to like a 5-year old. It's like, you know what's going to happen. So it's like, so rules versus decisions are in part, I think, also the recognition that we can't, you have an uneasy relationship with yourself. You like yourself, you trust yourself sometimes, you don't trust yourself a lot. And so rules are this, like, I think of as this weighty, in this democracy of self, this constitutional process that you say, okay, guys, we've all agreed, like, this rule seems good. So you have to be careful in picking them. I think a lot of people I see, they pick, and I've done this myself, they pick rules willy-nilly. That's just handing over power to the person in that moment who thought that was a good idea. So it's like, you want a protracted process for picking a rule. Like, to your friend, I would say, fine, write down no dessert. But that's not the rule that you've decided. That's the rule that's been proposed. Now we're going to have a vote over the next week. Let's see how every self that shows up over the next week feels about the rule of no dessert. If at the end we've got, a supermajority, then we know who's imposing that rule. The confederacy of selves that have appeared at different times wanting different things have all agreed this is a good rule. And so now we're implementing it. And so I think that gives rules. I think well thought out rules have the property that they are ones that many parts of ourselves subscribe to. Poorly thought out rules, I think, don't have that property and are doomed, if not to failure, to misery at some level.
Yeah, I was overgeneralizing a little bit. I mean, you do have to establish your own rules. That's the only way you're going to stick with them. But the idea is, like, your best self and your worst self and your sort of like all of yourselves are creating these rules to be like, this is the type of person I want to be. This is the path I want to go. These are the dreams I want to accomplish. And then you can just ask yourself, what would people who have done this or are doing this, what would the rules be that are going to nudge me in that direction? So it could be like, I'm not drinking, every night of the week. I only drink Fridays and Saturdays. And then my rule is I cut off at 9. And now, I mentioned this to sort of Danny when we were talking, and he added an aspect to it that I think he surfaced an aspect I had never really consciously recognized, which is like, people don't argue with rules. And talking to you, and I'm like, we wouldn't even argue with our own rules. So it's not that other people won't even argue with our rules, because you can push back and you can get away with things. And the example Danny gave on the podcast was sort of, I have a rule that I never agree to anything on the phone, which prevents him from agreeing in the moment for sort of like social approval. But your rule with yourself, you would never really disagree with it because it would be the rule, and the rule would be part of the identity, and the identity is part of what you created.
I love it. I think that's such a nice way of putting it. And I think the mistakes I've made, A, not having enough rules, but also I think it's why you need this legislative process that allows this period of time where you have many parts of yourselves to register their dislike. Like if they're like, no, look, I don't agree with it. And it the multiplicity of selves necessarily means I think some people are like this. I don't know how they're like this, where they're just like wake up one day and say, this is what I'm doing, and then they do it. That's not me. There's a lot of chaos inside me. I think there's a lot of chaos inside most people. So I think the legislative process is also what gives rules the weight to say you can't agree with this. We've all talked about it. Like that's it. Like it's just if you agree, you're in the vast minority, and so you're right, and then you don't disagree. It's like in a constitutional democracy. One reason we don't fight the laws is because the laws were made through a process we all agree with. Now, when the laws stop being made through that process, as we're starting to see in a certain country, then people do suddenly disagree. So I think it's the process is what lends credence to the moral weight of a rule.